Welcome to the Building Performance Podcast, where we talk about the science of homes. Today, we're talking about sleep and ventilation. I'm very excited to have with us today an expert in IAQ, specifically doing a lot of research on sleep, which is an understudied thing. So this is Paweł Wargocki. Paweł, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for inviting me to the podcast.
Of course. You're a professor at the Technical University of Denmark. We happen to have brushed paths because of this Chemistry of Indoor Environments program. And you had said, oh, I'm doing this research on sleep if you're interested in talking. And we're very interested in talking. So first thing, if you would, I've got a whole list of questions here for you, is how do your sleep studies work?
Well, I mean, we do two types of sleep studies. One type is that we invite people to sleep in our lab, where we change the conditions and monitor their sleep quality. That is a very complicated process and very long and very costly. So we prefer to do the studies in actual bedrooms of people. And the reason for that is also that we would really like to go to the environments where people sleep normally. Because if you invite people to the sleep lab or to our lab to sleep here, they will have to sleep at least 1 or 2 nights to basically adapt to the environment. And then we can actually get the measurements that could be used to draw conclusions. Also, we cannot keep them too long here, and it also disturbs their normal lifetime. So this is the reason why we prefer to do the field measurements. Although to study specific aspects, we invite people to sleep with us here in the lab.
And it looked like from your papers, which, by the way, everybody, I'm going to give links to your papers that you sent me, if that's all right with you.
Of course.
So that people can read those. I think that it said that you've got people wired up with EKGs, and then you're monitoring their pulse and their blood ox level and all that stuff, and also taking blood and running the blood constantly through a monitor. Is that also true?
No, we didn't do that. We are not a medical lab. So well, for a EEG truly and or the or other measurements of sleep, we do only EEG, and our colleagues from China they do the other one types basically, but we do it very seldom. People don't like to sleep, with the equipment attached to their body. And again, this is important way of measurement of sleep quality. However, it may be useful for looking at the specific aspects of sleep in the actual sleep research that look at the fundamental issues related to sleep. What we are really interested in is to make as least disturbance to sleep as possible. In a way, we would like people to sleep normally, as they normally do, so then there is nothing attached to their body, basically. We do not circulate any blood, and we don't take the blood, basically in the environment that they normally sleep, and then monitor how the changes in this environment may affect their sleep quality using the instruments that do not disturb their sleep directly.
Great. Okay. So you are interested in this specifically, or the research that you're doing, the grant that you've gotten to do this, is interested because, based on the article that you wrote for ASHRAE, sleep is different now than ever before because we've got a whole bunch of new stimulus. We've changed the climate in a lot of homes. And so you made some notes about like how climate conditioning inside of homes might make a difference here. But you were looking at physical factors inside of the room that you're sleeping in, like noise, like security and other like light quality and things like that, but also temperature, humidity, obviously, air quality, meaning like markers like CO2, which we've talked about a fair number of times on this channel, and also air velocity. I thought that was a really interesting one because, so can you talk a little bit more about the specific, those specific kind of ranges that you're looking at? And I believe that you've also done surveys of other studies to see what they found about ventilation as well.
So our focus was mainly on air quality and so ventilation. In other words, ventilation. People, air quality is very often, equal with ventilation. And then thermal environments. We also looked and are looking now into the aspect of light and daylight exposure. We haven't published yet anything on this, and we have instruments that allow us monitoring the daylight exposure during the day and see whether there is any connection with the sleep quality. But we didn't look into the noise aspect. Generally, I want to say I'm not a sleep researcher, so we are using the methods that were developed by the sleep research to basically observe how the indoor environment affects sleep quality. So we are not developing our own methods for measuring sleep quality, and this is an important issue. With respect to the sleep quality as such, one other aspect that I want to add is that we want to see whether the indoor environment can contribute to the to disturbance of sleep. In other words, whether it can exacerbate the problems with sleep. So we are not saying that, okay, you don't sleep well because, the air quality is poor, and this is the main reason why you don't sleep well. This may probably exacerbate the problems of sleeping that you may have because of the other factors. As we know, this is a very complicated matter, and there are many other aspects that influence your sleep. But let's imagine that you have a stressful day and you want to go to bed and sleep and relax, and then you may have for example, high temperature that would disturb your sleep. It would be difficult for you to fall asleep. So we want to avoid that element. Of course, we would not completely remove all the problems that are related to sleep. And this is one important issue that needs to be added here. So we looked into the aspect of ventilation and different way of how you can ventilate your bedroom. I mean, you can ventilate it by the system, so mechanical system that is actually designed to ventilate the bedroom, or you can ventilate the bedroom with the or by opening the window, or you can ventilate your bedroom by opening the door to the bedroom also. And we looked whether any of those methods of ventilating the bedroom will affect your sleep quality. Then we looked into or we started to look into the aspect of some pollutants, which pollutants could be responsible for your sleep quality. And we have preliminary results from other groups, not ours, but because we started just these measurements on particles. Particles have sources indoors and outdoors, and it turns out that presence of particles will affect the sleep quality. Then we also looked in the aspect of thermal conditions, more on the warm side, not on the cold side. So if it is overheating in the bedroom, what are the consequences for your sleep quality? And more and more, we look into the low relative humidity aspect. We know that at the high level, and this is our collaboration with the groups in Japan, when you have a high temperature and high humidity will exacerbate the negative effects of high temperature. So this is the areas where we are looking at. Air velocity is an aspect of providing a local cooling, maybe. So this is the issue that we are also looking into.
And that's interesting. So, so I'm going to get into this local cooling, and also you talk about local ventilation. But I wanted to make a point real quick for anybody who's watching who has a misting humidifier in their room or an essential oil diffuser. Both of those things are responsible for huge amounts of particles in the air, which Paweł
Right.
just pointed out is like, just don't do that. So, steam humidifier, if you can have humidify in your room, is the best way. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree to also the fragrances into the air.
Yeah,
Those
essential oils.
fragrances kind of are essential oils. Actually, they can actually, as you know from the workshop that you participated in, is basically they can react with the ozone, for example, in the air, and then produce toxic pollutants and also particles.
So one thing about opening the window, just before we leave the window
Right.
conversation and get into more interesting kind of velocity, and ventilation techniques, which I think our audience will be particularly interested in. Opening the window at night this was a recent thing that I can't remember which video, but I was interviewing someone else and they were mentioning ventilating at night. And I just pointed out in the comments, I believe, that NO3 is a compound that exists outside at night, according to what we found out in this CIE workshop. But it gets burned away by the sun in the daytime. So opening your window at night introduces like kind of specialized compounds that are slightly toxic, that are different than what you'd have during the day. Do you have any other compounds that you were interested in specifically as far as looking into pollutants that come in through the window?
Well, so I would like to add one point here is, of course, opening the window is a solution in areas where you have a low level of pollution outside and also mild temperatures. In case when you go to the, and also, there are other types of, you can call it pollutants that are introduced. It's a noise. So it is a matter of where you are located. Not everywhere the opening of windows will actually help your sleep quality. But
Mm,
in most of the areas, it will actually, where you have a low pollution outside. We performed the studies in Denmark and in China, and we found out the opening windows in China, especially during summer period, would not work because there is the temperature plus particles, probably particles that are introduced into the bedrooms. So we didn't observe any positive effect of opening the windows in China, but we saw them in Denmark.
mm,
So this is true. In fact, we would really like to know what pollutants are really important for negative effects, and there are many, many toxic pollutants. We are only just beginning to understand the entire field of sleep quality and bedroom environment. So this is some research that needs to be done in the future. However, as I said, we truly know that particles will play here the role. Probably other reactive and toxic compounds, but which one, it's rather difficult to identify those that are toxic, and maybe the mixtures of those pollutants create a toxic combination, basically, that affects us. And then some of the effects cannot be seen immediately. They can be seen, in a long run. So, I mean, low exposure to some pollutants you will not get sick immediately, but it may disturb your sleep immediately. So this is an
and
interesting part, right?
affect the quality of life. Right.
Yes, yes,
Which is hard to measure. Okay,
right.
so let's so dialing into like the specific variables that you're looking at, temperature. This was something that was really interesting from your research. Uh like I'm always kind of coaching people like, "Oh, let's just use what in the States we've got manual J calculation which aims for 75 degrees indoor
Right.
temperature in the summertime with a 50% relative humidity, 70 degrees, and I like to keep it between 30 and 50% relative humidity, which let's leave the humidity to the side for a second. But
Mhm.
I sleep in a room that's 75 degrees all summer long and 72 degrees all winter long. Your research showed that the amount of heat that your body gives out
Mm.
varies like a lot. I think it's 14% is the number that you found. So
Right.
our body needs more heat. Like the temperature that's ideal over the course of the night changes from when you first fall asleep, when you're in deep sleep, and
Mm.
then when you're trying to wake up again. Will you talk more about that?
This is correct. Yeah. It seems like although we think about the indoor the bedroom environment and actual our bed as the very static environment is actually a very dynamic environment, and it looks like that the different stages of sleep will require different temperatures. We are only about to understand that and then try to develop the solutions which would follow those changes in the heat that is produced by the body. Probably this is related to the stages of sleep, where basically, for example, in a deep sleep, we would be nearly looking like a dead person, I would say, because all our systems, body physiological systems, will be nearly turned down to the minimum. So then there will be less heat probably produced. And then where we go to the REM it will be a very active where we will produce a lot of heat. So probably this is what is happening. This is why we would change the generation of heat. But I think we have a system in our body that we adapt to these changes. So basically, if we dress properly and we have a proper bedding, so this is what we do is, we are not all the night covered. If you observe for the people, we uncover ourselves and then we cover ourselves again. The most important is that if we have too low temperatures or too high temperatures, this natural behavioral adaptation to the conditions during the night would not work that efficiently, perhaps. And then
It's
you will be, for example, if it's too hot and you are not able to remove the heat from the body, you will probably wake up, or you will leave one stage of sleep to another stage of sleep. So you will not get enough, maybe deep sleep.
And because you're an indoor environmental quality researcher, not a sleep researcher,
Right.
it seems like the kind of thing to me as a grown up, I'm like, oh, you just learn how you like to sleep. Like if you're hot, you take off those pajamas. Don't sleep with pajamas anymore. You're not a pajama.
Right, right, right.
But like, are you saying that the building and the bedroom's actual building science and dynamics as far as the heat bleed and the moisture flow and all that stuff, that
Mhm.
might be affecting things beyond people's ability to control it by just flipping the cover on and off?
Yeah, what you mean is that because we are, if we not design building correctly or the environment correctly in a bedroom, then maybe it will overrule. This is what you are saying. Our capacity to, to behaviorally adapt to the conditions in a bedroom. This is correct,
Okay,
probably.
interesting. And one of the things that I was so happy that you actually mentioned outright in your article and in your studies is contact cooling. So here's the thing that happens in America. People think, based on the houses that they've lived in, which our construction style is very different than yours, but people grow up in these top floor bedrooms where you've got the heat of the sun all day long,
Right,
radiating that heat overnight from the roof and the attic down into
right,
your body. So it's radiant temperature. You look at the thermostat on the wall, the thermostat on the wall says it's 72, and you're like, well, that's not, I can't sleep at that. I have learned now that I need to sleep in a room that where the wall thermostat says 65. And to a lot of us who are in HVAC design and HVAC diagnostics and troubleshooting, like that's a nightmare. Don't make the whole room 65 degrees because you're playing at that point with condensation risk and dew point.
right. I
So
agree.
you were pointing out that like actually having a pad that cools your skin on contact, which they make now,
Mm, mm.
is a better way of doing it rather than trying to affect the whole air of the room
Right.
you're in.
Yeah. There are solutions where you have but not very popular, or not, how to say, you can't go to any shop and buy those. But
Yeah.
I mean, there are solutions with ventilated mattresses, the solutions with those pads that can provide local cooling and so on and so on. I think the most important probably issue, except for the cooling pads, is the moisture that we generate. We generate a lot of moisture when we sleep. And
More than
basically,
when we're awake?
uh, that I really don't know, but we
Okay.
we sweat a lot when we sleep,
Mm.
sometimes more than you could imagine. And probably the sweat that we generate or the sweating during the night can be very much disturbing our sleep. And then probably providing a proper ventilation within the bedding, would remove some of the moisture and then bring the body to the more balance.
And you
This is something
actually
that we really would like to investigate in the
do
future.
you know of anything that exists like what you're supposed you were saying that it would be a great idea to
Yeah,
have mattresses that actually sense sweat
right. There,
and
there
then
are attempts. I know that there are attempts in, at least in Japan, I know, and also the very expensive beds. They claim, the producers of them, they claim that they use a special mattresses and with a special feeling that actually remove the moisture when you
Hmm.
sleep. But
I
I
hear that
cannot
kind of thing and
document
I'm
that.
always
This is
like
whether this is true or not. But this is what. But
just to be clear,
but
everybody,
they
you're
are
allowed to
aware of
say,
that. But they are
yeah,
aware of that issue,
yeah,
right?
that's
So
a good
that is
thing.
a very important thing.
Right. Yeah, I've seen a fair amount on the social media platforms of like these little fans that you could put into the bed. And I always, the first time I see anything on, any social media, I'm just like, ugh, they're trying to sell something else. Like this has been sitting on my desk for a carbon,
Right,
filter
right,
for
right.
like this is a
I know.
replacement for
But,
your kitchen
but yeah,
exhaust.
yeah. But
And
this
I'm
is
just like, I can't wait. I'm been trying to figure out a way to
this
make
one is
fun of it.
probably also to clean the air because there is a carbon filter in it, right?
Which weighs like nothing. I mean, it really
Yeah,
doesn't
I
work.
know,
So
I
that's
know,
the thing, I
I
think.
know that.
You
But
and
I
I.
mean, this is correct. This is correct what you are saying. But I think we should not underestimate our own capacity to basically behaviorally adapt to the conditions in bedrooms. So we need to avoid the extremes. So those who, if it's too hot, and what means too hot is difficult to, we will have to basically determine that. But probably if you are at the temperatures, now I'll have to quickly calculate. 28C would be like 85 maybe. Yeah. If
That's
you
too
are
high.
above 80 probably or 82, then the capacity of removing the heat is dropping immediately. Because even
Mhm.
if you sleep naked without any cover or nothing, right, it's basically you have a contact and so on, so on. You will not be able to remove the heat. So then it
Pavel,
will.
is this roughly what you're talking about? This overlay? This is called
Yeah, but
the
this is for. I'm not sure whether this is developed for sleeping person. So and
interesting.
how much the comfort zone for. I mean, we should call it a comfort sleep or sleep comfort zone probably.
Right.
How
Yeah.
much it translate into the sleep because this is for the awake person.
Interesting.
So,
And so just to back up for a second, uh, I'm interested in what you think philosophically about sleep and the state of sleep. I know a little bit about it based on
right,
your writing, but I think that I just want to, my own brain is telling me, hey, first world problems. I have three little kids
right.
and I have not slept well in 9 years. Um, And then we look at like doctors, for example, who are the main people who are out there telling you, you need to get a good night's sleep. And if you actually look at doctors themselves, they do not sleep the way that they are prescribing either. So, in your mind, like, how bad are we at the like worst that it can get right now? Can it get worse? Like, what are we worried about fixing on a societal level? Or are you looking at like just individual quality of life and like, hey, you'll be a lot happier, you'll function better, etc.
So I will come back to what I said before is that we are not going to fix your sleep by providing a better ventilation if you have three children and then you have to feed some of those and then some of those wake up during the night or if you have a stressful day. What we are trying to fix is to when your children sleep one night and you can sleep and suddenly your ventilation is not working properly, so you still cannot sleep.
Hmm.
Or when you you still want to catch a little bit of sleep and you cannot fall asleep because the environment or the temperature is too high in your bedroom. So this is what we are looking at here. So we are going to remove this additional element to all the other disturbing factors to your sleep.
Okay. Yeah. And also for kids who are developing, obviously, if they can sleep well through the night, then I can sleep well through the night.
I know I am not a sleep researcher, but what I read about the sleep is this is amazingly crucial for us, for
Hmm.
our health, not only our next day performance. Obviously, we all know that if we don't sleep well, next day we are not going to perform well, or maybe we will be fighting and getting some naps during the day, basically to get us through the day. But I mean, in the long run, this is the poor sleep may result in the problems such as Alzheimer disease,
Early onset dementia.
obesity, diabetes, and so on, so on. There are studies that document that. So it's really something that we should not, how to say, neglect
Mhm.
or compromise. I
Yeah.
myself compromise this, and I know that this is not good that I do it. But I know that if I sleep well one night, the next day is just absolutely amazing.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Okay. So I want to dial in on velocity a little bit because one of the
Oh,
things
okay.
that you posited is what if, just like we're doing contact cooling, like
Right.
personal cooling, not room cooling, everybody, personal cooling, just
Mhm.
applying the coolness to the person. What
Mhm.
if we had personal ventilation instead
Right.
of room ventilation or even home ventilation?
Right.
So,
Right.
what does that mean, and how does that affect with the velocity
Right.
conversation about that affecting sleep?
So, well, personal ventilation is the way that you basically, instead of conditioning the entire room, you condition the space where you are, or the part of the room where you are located. In a sense, if you, and bed is the best way to do it because during the night, unless you have to, but you spend the entire night over there. So basically, you can provide ventilation to that specific location of the bedroom. And then we call it a personal ventilation because if imagine that you have two people sleeping in a bed and one person requires different condition than the other, you can start to control the conditions for one person and the conditions for the other person by having this. And also, if you do not have to ventilate the entire space, you save energy. You provide probably less, maybe less air, but maybe the same amount of air. This is to be basically further discussed how much this is done. But then you will not mix the air that is supplied to the person that is sleeping with all the other pollutants that are in the space. So basically, if you clean the air and you deliver it to the person, it will not, how to say, it will not capture all the pollutants that are everywhere emitted from all the materials that you have and furnishing in your bedroom. So this is an advantage of having a personal ventilation. It's just delivering the air directly to a person. And those two different people, different requirements. You may have a person who is allergic or maybe allergic to house dust mite and may require slightly different conditions for sleeping to avoid or to, you know, to make sure that there will be no allergic effects than the person sleeping next to her.
Yeah, and that definitely
So,
happens with
so that's,
families.
and then if you think about velocity, is the velocity are two things to it. Is one is how you deliver the air from the personal unit. So you will need to have a certain velocity of the air that is supplied to basically to access a person that is sleeping. And then this velocity should not be too high because it may provide a local cooling. And this is another issue with the air velocity. It may actually provide a local cooling. So in the spaces where you have too high temperature, you can actually provide a cooling by pro providing the air with a high velocity.
Like for example, if it's really hot and all
Yeah,
you've got is a
exactly.
ceiling fan.
You
So
show
so
you show me the fan. So this is exactly the point.
right, right. So but having a fan like that, not that silly fan, but like a real fan, if you
Right.
were actually to point it on your body and cool
Yes,
yourself by
exactly.
4 degrees
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
by evaporating your sweat, you're saying that that doesn't affect. I thought that that's what you meant is that having a
It may
velocity on your skin would affect your sleep negatively.
it may affect if the effect is too strong.
I
Right.
see. Okay, got it. So you came up with a per person range, and I just want to share this real quick. This is from one of your papers. This is a survey of everybody, like people who have standards for this. How
Yes.
many uh, liters per second we're looking at
Yeah,
per
sure.
person, and it's a range between you said between 6 and 10. Some of these are as low as 4.
Yeah,
Some of
and
the ranges for CO2 for whole house ventilation, they're like and not an order of magnitude, not 10 times different, but they're like, this is a huge range. There's a lot, they're all over the place, kind of.
right.
So, based on this, you said that somewhere between 6 and 10 liters per second, which is 13 to 21 CFM, is ideal per person
Right.
in sleep mode.
Right.
Do you find that that's different? Like the what ASHRAE says about it is 7.5 CFM per person, but we also add to that the building. So I would
Right.
think that that ends up being somewhere in your range of 13 to 21. Do you Agree?
Right. Yeah, yes. Well, this table also shows that there are many standards that do not provide any
Mm.
requirements for bedrooms. Usually, if you talk about the residential environments, and that applies also for ASHRAE 62.2, is that this is a whole house ventilation. And so basically what you do is you provide how much ventilation there should be per person or per in air change rates, so for the entire dwelling. So how in air change per hour, and then basically you assume that the air will be split for the different rooms based on the size of those rooms or the floor area of the room. In ASHRAE 62.2, you have a ventilation that is based on the number of bedrooms. And then based on the number of bedrooms, you will have the ventilation for the entire residential house, but
You don't have to
not
deliver it.
for the bedroom as such.
Yeah.
And but that I will speak up to this in a moment because actually it is not a big issue. It's basically how you deliver the air later. You can solve that. So you can still keep the requirements. And then our research suggests that you need to have a ventilation that is keeping the carbon dioxide that is produced by sleeping people below 1000 ppm. And that
Oh.
would correspond to, because, it's very difficult to measure ventilation. So as a proxy
Mm.
for ventilation, we use carbon dioxide concentration. We all produce carbon dioxide, and this is the waste of all the metabolic processes or physiological processes that are occurring in our body. So we exhale a lot of CO2, and then this CO2 can be used as a marker of ventilation. And then in the research that we performed and the other groups performed, instead of measuring the actual ventilation in CFM per person, what we did is we measured carbon dioxide, and then knowing how much carbon dioxide is produced by a sleeping person, we can convert this into the ventilation requirement. And all our research showed that if you are above 1000 ppm CO2, so if you have a ventilation that your carbon dioxide concentration in your bedroom is above 1000 ppm, there will be some disturbance to sleep in form of it will take you more time to sleep, or you will awake more often during the night, or you will sleep shorter, and so on and so
Mm.
on. And then, but if you go below 1000 ppm, there'll be no disturbance. But how much you need to go below 1000 ppm, we don't know, because we don't have studies that compared, let's say, CO2 below 1000 ppm against the CO2 even lower than this CO2. So let's
Yeah.
say 900 versus 600, for example, or something
Sure.
like that.
And your point is,
We
even
don't
if you
have
slept
that.
outside and you had just
Right.
outside levels of CO2,
Yeah.
the
Right.
pollutants, the noise, the security concerns,
Yeah.
the light
Yes.
pollution, all that
We,
stuff. So there's a lot of variables.
we
So
believe if you keep your ventilation in the bedroom, that your CO2 is below 1000 ppm, better 900 or maybe even better 800 ppm, then there will be no disturbance to sleep. So that would correspond to the ventilation of, let's say, above the 12, 13 CFM per person, best having 20 CFM per person. There was the hygienist in Germany, a man a professor in Munich. His name was Pettenkofer. In the late 19th century, he was doing a lot of research on water supply and also on ventilation, basically on residences. And he had famous lectures that are published. And then he was actually saying that in bedrooms, the CO2 levels of ventilation should be as such, so the CO2 levels are around 700 ppm. And it seems like his recommendation from the late 19th century holds now with the new research. It looks like
very interesting.
very,
And they
very
didn't even have
interesting.
airtight homes back then.
No, there were no airtight homes, but there were other types of pollution, of course.
Very
Today
interesting.
we have airtight homes, maybe less pollution in homes. And this is why. It's very difficult to say whether it should be 12 CFM or maybe 10 CFM. 10 CFM. It depends on the 20 CFM. It all depends what you have in your bedroom.
Okay.
I think the bedroom should not be considered as the places for storage. Often, if you have a house, where should I store this stuff? So we put it all in our bedrooms, and then we build up the pollution level because there is pollutants that are emitted from the stuff that we store in the bedroom.
Like flame retardants come out of all electronics. Yep.
Exactly. For example, flame retardant. Some people keep, the fish in aquariums in the bedrooms, and so on, so on. So all that, try to avoid all those sources of pollution, or keep them locked in the cabinets if you keep
Yep.
them in your bedroom.
The Scandinavian design that you guys have perfected of minimalism in rooms. I think
Yeah,
that's what
I
you're
think
kind
the
of aiming for.
Japanese are
You just
much
want us to
better
design our
in this,
houses
but
like
this is correct. Yeah.
that. Okay, so before we get too deep into people imagining a headboard of a bed that's equipped with a little
Right,
ERV
right,
port that's
right,
going to
right.
supply 12
Sure.
CFM, very low velocity, right at your
Sure, sure, sure,
face.
sure, sure, sure.
I just want to remind everybody that you can do this CO2 regulation by moving the CO2 with the forced air system that we have in America
Exactly.
in your house from one room that you're in to another room. So you just
Right,
keeping your air handler cycling can just dilute it by spreading the CO2 around the entire house. Do you agree?
right, correct.
Okay. So outdoor ventilation is not required in this case if you can do that. And maybe you can't do that because you've got 20 people living in a four-bedroom house. In which case yeah, you're gonna have to do something about it.
If you move as you said, CO2 with a forced ventilation, as in the American homes, basically you will not dilute the pollutants that are within the home. You will generate one big volume in your home where the pollutant levels are similar. What you really do with the outdoor air is you will reduce the level of those pollutants. So this is why the ventilation with outdoor air is so important here. And I want
And
to say that our research shows that actually opening the doors to bedroom will reduce your CO2 level because
hmm,
during night people are in bedrooms, not in the other spaces, but it will not improve your sleep quality.
yeah, it's funny.
But
You'll have a lot
because
of
this
people
is
say,
exactly the point.
yeah, people will say here that you need to sleep with the door closed because fire. We're worried about
Yeah,
that
yeah, of
night
course.
that your
Yeah,
house burns
that's
down.
good.
I
That's
sleep with
good.
the door open because I've got three little kids and I have to figure
Yes, of
out
course
like
you have to
what they
listen to, yeah, yeah, exactly.
but air leakage, just FYI, if you've
Right.
got an air leaky house, you're getting a fair amount of air leakage. And in fact,
Exactly.
if you run
Exactly.
ASHRAE 62.2, which is standard that we use here, sometimes it says you do not need any mechanical ventilation from outside because you're getting so much flooding in from just the gaps and cracks in your house. That's
It,
less of
it
a
can
problem
it can
where,
happen, right? Yeah,
yeah.
it can be the case.
So you mentioned early on, and this is I think that we've explored like quite a bit about this. So I'll take just a
Right.
few more minutes of your time if that's all right. The sleep quality research. You had said we're using research that was already done on sleep quality. Do you think that that research is accurate? Like, are you worried at all that the markers and the variables that they controlled for in those studies was at all um, not done exactly right, and then we need to dig a little bit deeper into that?
Right. There is one matter that maybe one issue that we could basically look into this. I'm not very, how to say, dubious about the findings because what we see is we see it across different studies made by different groups and in different regions of the world. So I think I'm not worried about this. Is what we are really should be more interested in is the stages of sleep. So this is the area where really better understanding how the ventilation and air quality and all other parameters affect how much time we spend in different stages of sleep, which are crucial for our sleep quality.
Cool.
So that would be probably that would require further enlightenment, and polysomnographs are the only method today that would provide a very accurate measure of the sleep stages.
I wonder how much AI and these new watches that people are wearing. My wife has a watch that tells her it shows her a graph of basically her sleep stages during the
Yes.
night. By the way, good news, everybody. They figured out that spiders dream because little baby spiders are translucent and they can watch their eyeballs through their body and see that their eyeballs move. So like that's I think pretty exciting. So
Fantastic.
hopefully we all species take sleep seriously. Thank you very much for your research and for sharing this stuff with us today. And I will
Okay,
again,
thanks.
everybody, I'm gonna post links to the papers that you can get to read Dr. Wargocki's research. Thank you very much. I hope that we will cross paths again in person
Okay, thanks a
someday
lot for
down the road.
inviting me, and thanks for staying with us for those who are listening to us.
Absolutely. All right, you
Thanks.
guys, make sure you comment below if you have anything to add about ventilation or about sleep quality. Like and subscribe. Tune in next time.
Thanks.